Anthony, good. Well, it's morning here, so it'll be good evening to you. How are things in the UK?
Thank you very much. Yes, good morning to you. It is the evening. The sun is going down. It's been a beautiful day. We've had a mini heat wave, so
Wow.
26 degrees. We're
Wow.
calling this summer at the moment. So yes, yeah,
Yeah.
doing well, and the sunshine always puts people in a good mood. So yeah, I'm happy.
Excellent. Excellent. So you have summer for a week, and then it's going to be winter all over again.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
We normally it rains a lot, then it gets hot, and we complain that it's too hot, and then it goes back to raining again. But no, to be honest, we've been lucky since lockdown. We've been quite lucky with the weather, and it's made it as bearable as it can be when you're trapped at home
Yeah.
working from the home office.
Mm. So you've been kind of in lockdown because in New Zealand we're different. We've opened now and we can move around, but you guys still are closed mostly indoors, aren't you? And you're in London,
Yeah, so there's some people are going back to work. The shops are opening. More shops are open now, and things are starting to go back to normal. But there's a lot of people and a lot of companies are actually being quite kind in making it possible for people to continue to work from home. I've got a feeling that a lot of businesses, and I've already heard this from a few clients, they're going to be getting rid of their offices soon and doing more home working and only getting people together every now and then. But yeah, no, it's been strange, to be honest with you. I do a lot of training, so a lot of my clients that were booked in the diary just moved online. We did Zoom sessions instead. Had to structure them differently and look at the exercises in a slightly different way.
Yes.
But that all worked quite nicely. But yeah, I think a lot of businesses have been hit.
Yeah.
But I think the nice thing is people are now craving conversation. Okay, and I don't just say this because of what I do, but we're all getting used to these Zooms. But actually, when you phone people, it's surprising how many people answer now and how into the conversation they are. So yeah, now's a good time to be picking up the phone.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And that kind of leads us in a nice way to your businesses and what you do. So you're known as the telephone assassin. You wrote a book about this. You train people. So your training is really about doing telemarketing or phone work in the right way. How, if I take you back into the past, how did you get into this? How did you start with
So to the begin, well, when I left school, my first job, I went to work for an estate agent selling properties. Okay, because I knew I was going to go into sales, and I wanted to sell the thing with the biggest possible commission. I heard you got a company car. I thought this is really, really good. So I decided that was the profession I wanted to go into, and I went for 4 job interviews. And I was really lucky, and I actually got offered all 4 jobs. I was quite enthusiastic and offered all 4 jobs. And I took the job that actually paid the least. And it was on the basis that they actually had a proper training program. They told me about this development program they were going to put me through. They were going to teach me about negotiation, about photography, all this kind of stuff. Whereas the others were kind of smaller independent ones. And I remember phoning the ones that offered me the job to say, actually, thank you, but I'm going to be going with this company. And 2 out of 3 of them said, but they pay nearly half, only just over half of what we offered you. Why are you doing that? And I told them, and yeah, I ended up working for Man & Co. or Man Countrywide, part of the Countrywide group here in the UK. And at the time, they were the biggest estate agency group in the UK. They owned Rightmove, which was the property website back then. And yeah, it was interesting because I learned a lot. I learned a lot from brilliant managers. They taught me the art of negotiation and getting the sellers to come down to here and the buyers to come up to here, and then joining them in the middle so that everybody feels like they win. My first manager told me that you can't sell a house, you can't convince somebody to buy a house, but you can give it a really good chance by knowing a lot about the area, knowing what's in every cupboard, opening all the windows and the blinds so it's as bright as possible, making sure the windows are open, even the trick of putting some toast on or something along those lines that gets the smell going. There were all kinds of subtle tricks. I had air fresheners in my car. I used to turn up half an hour early for some clients so that we could take their dogs to the neighbours.
Wow.
There were all kinds of things that I kind of learned along the way. But it was actually that manager who I think put me on my path to becoming the telephone assassin. So indulge me here, but I remember I was one of the young. I was actually the youngest valuer in the company,
Wow.
and I went out to value a property that borders onto the town where I was based. So I was based in the Bracknell office, which was a big office, but if I'm honest with you, on the housing side of things, it was one of the cheaper of the surrounding areas. And next to us, we have Ascot, Royal Ascot, where the racecourse is, where the houses are millions of pounds. And I remember going to value a house over in Ascot, and it was the usual kind of experience. I passed the owner of the other estate agency who I was up against on the drive. It was an in and out drive, so I could see him coming out in his Jaguar as I pulled in. And I did my usual thing. I remember sitting down with comparable properties and letting them determine what the price was based on what was selling. I didn't tell them what I thought it was worth or anything like that. And then I gave them the fee. And it turned out that what was quite common is I'd given them the lowest valuation that they'd heard and the highest fee. And I used to say, well, the valuation you came up with, because I helped you work it out like a surveyor does, and the reason we're the most expensive is we're the biggest and the best, and we own Rightmove, and you've got me to look after you, basically. And usually that worked, but I was at this house in Ascot, and as I went to leave the house, a lovely couple, a mature couple, she said, thanks ever so much for coming to see us, and I shook both of their hands. And then just before he shut the door, he said, what does that kid know? And it rang in my ears the whole way back to the office. And I got back to the office and my manager said, so when's that house coming on? When is it listing? And I just said, I didn't get it. And she said, what do you mean? Why didn't you get it? You get like 90 something % of the houses you value. What happened? And I explained what had happened. And her advice was, I suggest you prove you're not a kid before you get there next time. And I was like, how do I do that? And what I started to realize was that appointment that I went to, somebody else had booked that appointment. So when I went to see them, that was the first time I'd ever met them. And what I realized was that if I had a good conversation with somebody on the telephone before I met them, quite often one of the first things they would say is, you're younger than I expected. And I could take it as a compliment. Yeah. And actually, I look quite youthful now. I'm getting on for nearly 40 now. Back then, I looked like a teenager. And it's a tricky thing. People do judge you on that. So it was that manager. And I remember sort of saying to her, how do I do it? And she said, and that's what you've got to figure out. And walked off. And then I figured out this whole thing of, well, look, if I've never met somebody before, maybe I should phone and have a conversation. And I realized if I could keep somebody talking for over 10 or 15 minutes before I meet them, there was about an 80% chance that the first thing they're going to say is, you're much younger than I expected. And it didn't bother me. I could take it as a compliment. And I'd already proved that I know what I'm talking about. And that kind of set me on my journey and made me realize that over here in the UK, it wasn't the most loved or respected profession. I'll be honest with you, estate agents, we're a little bit above used car salesmen, really. And I managed to stand out by doing just really little extra things for clients that I got told off for some of the time. Do you remember when we all used to have maps in our car rather than a sat nav? Do you remember that? In the UK, we have the A to Z map. And I remember I used to photocopy certain pages, and I would use highlighters to show where the schools and the shops were, so that if people were from out of the area, I could kind of show them where it was. And I had a printout of all of the links to where you could go and check out the local school ratings or the crime report with the local police, that kind of stuff. And I used to just have this little pack of printouts that I'd stapled together. It didn't look very nice, I'll be honest with you, but people really liked it. And funnily enough, we were the only agent in the whole of our town who didn't have computers. I used to have little postcards, this kind of size, okay, where you would have their name and what they were looking for in a box if they would look at semis as well as endoteric and all that kind of stuff. And you'd make your notes. And actually, that system worked quite well because you started to get to know your customers. They got to know you. But but yeah, it's the one profession that if I ever go back to being employed again, so I've worked for myself for about 14 years. If I ever go back to a proper job, estate agency or working in real estate is definitely where I'm going to go, because it's you meet amazing people and you see some amazing places, and you help a lot of people make the biggest purchase of their life.
Mm.
It's a massive thing. I know that there's lots of investors and stuff out there as well, but quite often this is somebody's home, and it's a real emotional journey for them, and it's our job to hold their hand through it and explain that this is just how long the solicitors take, and actually these are the things we can do to try and speed it up, and reassure them that this is an expensive process and it's emotionally charged, but the end result is you end up in your perfect or your dream home. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first job when I left school.
Excellent.
And then I suppose my career history is relatively short in the fact that after I did that, I went to work for a marketing company that sold databases to businesses, people who were looking for lists of customers to phone and or to email. And I used to sell databases, but I used to get asked to write the telesales script. And half the time I'd tell people, they'd say, well, what do I say when I'm reaching out to them? So I used to give them a bit of a script, and they go, and what do I say when I'm following them up? So I used to give them more scripts. And then eventually I only did that for a year or so, and I had enough of those clients saying, will you make the calls for me? So I started up making calls, and got locked into retainer type contracts, and then I got a waiting list of clients, which makes you feel quite good and special when you can say I have a waiting list of clients. But my accountant asked me a very good question, which is, how much money do you make out of a waiting list? And because I didn't have a smart answer, he said, well, I suggest you stop selling fish and go out and teach people to fish for themselves. So I contacted everybody on my waiting list and said, hey, unfortunately, I can't make calls for you, but I'm going to run a workshop and I'm going to show you the process that I go through and how to do it. Would you be interested? And of 23 people on my waiting list, 21 said yes. And I made quite a bit of money in one day and thought, oh, I could do more of this. So I started training and then speaking. And I'm now one of the go-to guys in the UK when it comes to telephone engagement. So obviously when we met, knowing that you do stuff with real estate, I thought it'd be great for us to have a chat and see if there's a few tips or bits that I might be able to share that could be helpful. Because I think at the moment, with what's going on at the moment, we can all learn something new, and there's opportunities out there at the moment, even if it seems a bit harder to find. But it sounds like, from what you were telling me, the market's pretty strong and buoyant there at the moment.
Yes, no, it really is interesting that post lockdown, and I think it's all over New Zealand from my conversations with people that I work with. But it seems as if the market is absolutely booming, and it's interesting, and it's, as long as we said earlier, as long as things are happening, people should just make as much of it as they can. So teaching people phone engagement, helping them get better at it. One of my observations with working with salespeople is that a lot of them really shy away from making what is known as cold calling. That they don't like it. There's a certain fear to it. Why do you think people shy away from it? Why don't they like it? What is the big fear in it?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think the two main ones are a fear of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
We're worried that people are going to go, no, I'm not interested, and you're going to get turned down. And I think the other fear is the fear of coming across like a real horrible salesperson, because I think most of us we've been on the receiving end of a terrible cold call, right? Where you can tell somebody's reading a script or they're not even listening to you, okay? And we don't want to come across like that. And a lot of us, we're quite nice, polite people. We don't want to impose on somebody's day and jump out and pitch at them. So I think that most of us have had a bad experience, and that fear of rejection makes us think, well, why don't I just send 500 emails instead? Maybe somebody will respond to me. So I think they're the main reasons. Yeah.
Okay. And so if people who are afraid or don't want to come across very salesy, what are some tips or some ideas or some suggestions that you can give them so they to make it easier they can pick up the phone and become more natural, and so the person on the other side doesn't think, oh, another horrible salesperson, and hang up.
So the best tip I can give. So when my friends ask me what the telephone assassin does, okay, because they kind of go, this is kind of funny, but what is it you actually do? So they went, it's kind of sales training, is it, or customer service training? And I say, well, look, I teach people good manners and advanced common sense. I try and make them nice and polite so that people want to talk to you and you don't offend anybody early on. And then the whole process element is you want to take them through an emotional journey where they decide that they want to do business with you, basically. So there's kind of 3 stages that you take them through, where you need to get them to like you, then you need to get them to respect you, and then you need to get them to do something, which we'll expand on in a minute. But I suppose one of the best tips I can give people who don't want to impose or come across real salesy is there's one of my golden rules is at the beginning of every phone call, particularly an outbound phone call to somebody, is you need to start off by getting permission to speak. Okay. Now, some of us do that already. We might sort of phone up and go, oh, hi there, are you free to chat for a minute? Or are you okay to talk? Or something along those lines. But I would tend to introduce myself and say, hey, my name's Anthony Sears. I was just hoping to chat to you for a couple of minutes, but I'm assuming perhaps now isn't the best time. Is there a better time to call you back? And by leading with the assumption that now's probably a bad time and making it really easy for them to get out of that call, makes them think this can't possibly be a sales call. Or if it is a sales call and you're a salesperson, then you're rubbish at it because you've made it really easy. Okay. So you tend to find that people's guard comes down when you use really good manners. Okay. And the typical response you usually get is, oh, well, actually, Anthony, I'm just about to go onto a Zoom meeting, or I'm just about to leave the office. Could you give me a call back at 3 o'clock? Or would you mind giving me a call on Friday instead? And I'll always say, yeah, no worries at all. I'll just pop it in my diary. Would you like me to send you a calendar invite? They usually say no, but occasionally they say yes. And then I say, fantastic, I'll give you a call on Friday. And then on Friday, I phone again and say, hey, you said to give you a call at 3 o'clock on Friday, but if now isn't a good time, if there's a better time to catch up perhaps next week, just let me know.
Yeah.
And I'd rather make it really easy for you to get out of this call and it take a month for us to speak, if it means that when we do speak, we have a proper conversation.
Right.
Because I think a lot of the time we are a bit nervous and we want to try and make it short and sharp, and we just blurt a pitch down the phone to whoever answers. And usually one of the most common responses is, could you just send me an email? Which is then basically saying, I'm too polite to hang up on you, but seeing as you're persistent, I'll give you my email and distract you and get you to send me an email instead. Yeah. Okay. So if the first thing people say to you is, can you just send me an email? It's usually because you haven't got permission to speak, or they've assumed that you've come across a bit salesy. Okay. Yeah. If that is what is happening, a really good response to say to people is, no worries at all. What would you like me to send? Because when you say that, you end up with about 3 to 5 seconds of pure silence, and they don't really know what to say. And most people just say, well, they do in the UK anyway, can you just send me your stuff? And that's where you've got a great line up your sleeve where you can say, I'm ever so sorry, but we've got a really strict no spam policy here. Until we've had a brief chat and I know what's going to be useful to send over, I can't send you anything. So don't worry, when's a better time to call you back? Okay. And it just stops you sending lots of emails to people who are just getting you to do it to get you off the phone. Yeah. Okay. If you start your calls by getting permission to speak, you'll find that you probably won't have any bad calls. Because what you often find is if you bulldoze into a conversation that somebody's not ready to have yet, you end up not getting the answer that you want. So, so my motto is I always say that I don't teach people how to sell. I show them how to help their customers to buy. Right. Okay. And that's the kind of the journey that you want to try and take people through. Yeah. So I sort of mentioned about that 3 phases of the conversation that you want to take people through. Typically, when you have a conversation with somebody, particularly if it's somebody new, the first part of the conversation, you just need to build rapport. Okay, you need them to like you, and just sometimes just good manners is enough for them to like you enough to listen, because that's all you really want. I need you to acknowledge me so that you engage, so that you start listening. Okay. Other ways to build rapport is to do some research first. So if, for example, you're approaching a client who is selling a property or has been trying to sell their property for a while, and you notice that they've moved agents, or that something's happened, or that you heard they had a buyer that fell through, I would be tempted to use that information in the early part of the conversation to say, hey there, you probably don't remember me. We valued your house 2 years ago. I know you've been on the market on and off, and you had some issues with a buyer. So hopefully you've not lost the dream house you told me about back then, or what do you think? That kind of thing can help. But once you can establish build a bit of rapport so that they like you enough to listen, you can move into the middle part of the conversation. And this is the bit where most people squirm a little bit, because it's the bit where you have to tell them how good you are. Okay. And when you are the business, it's kind of hard to not come across like you're bragging or you're being arrogant. So I always say, it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or a landscaper, the best way to perfect your pitch is to share a success story people can relate to. So basically, use testimonials and little case studies of other clients you've worked with in the past who are similar to that client. And sometimes it may be similar and relevant because it's in a similar area, i.e. you're demonstrating you've got clientele looking in that particular district or something along those lines. Sometimes it could be you might want to put labels on some of these testimonials, because you may have different bandings of price bandings, for example. So you might have up to $250,000, the quarter to $500,000, or whatever. I don't really know how it works. Or you might also want to label them with the 1 beds, the 2 beds, the 3 beds, or even the bungalows for the retired couples, or if it was somebody who perhaps was disabled or had mobility issues, and it was a very specialist house that you were trying to sell and find for them. There's probably some details there that, when you're talking to the right person, sharing that right success story can do the job of making them go, you have helped somebody like me before. Brilliant. That sounds just like me, or that sounds just like my property or my situation. So usually I talk about when you're prospecting, so you're doing your cold calling bit, it should feel like you're dropping off a pizza menu. Okay, I think you guys got that analogy, because over here in the UK on a weekly basis, I'll get the Domino's pizza menu and the Chinese menu. They all come through the letterbox. Okay. What they don't do is, I've never had them, and from what I can gather, it doesn't happen there either. They don't come and knock on your door when they're dropping off the menu, wait for you to answer and go, oh, hi there, can I take your order? Because that would be really rude. And actually, that's not how you want to come across when you're on the phone. You want to make it feel like you're literally just popping a leaflet through their letterbox. You're not imposing, you're just letting them know that you're there. But in what we do in the real estate world, yes, you can put it on a postcard and say, here's a flyer of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and look what they say about us. We've just sold their house recently. But if you were to pick up the phone and say, hey there, I see you've been on the market for a while. We sold quite a lot of these properties in the past. I know you decided to go with a different agent, but if we can go dual contract, or if you come to the end of your contract, I'd really love an opportunity to see if we could represent you, or however you would word it. And it's just a nice way of sort of saying to people, hey there, I know you, and the way I tend to approach it, and I think you guys probably would like this because it's nice and sensitive. If it's somebody where you valued their property a while back and they've been thinking about moving and just haven't quite done anything yet, you don't want to phone them up and go, hey there, have you decided to move yet? What are you waiting for? What you might do is say, hey there, we've not spoken for a while. I'm assuming nothing's changed, and at the moment there's no immediate plans to get the house on the market. You've not found your dream home you want to move to yet. Is that right? And lead with what you think is the worst case scenario. Because if that is the worst case scenario, they will acknowledge it and tell you that that's the case. And because you put it on the table, you can keep the conversation going. I always say, if you lead with the common objection, that's usually the best way to keep the conversation going. Because if you phone somebody up and say, hey there, just wondered if you guys have had any more thoughts about moving. And they say, no, we haven't. We know we've not made any decisions yet. You kind of go, oh, okay then. Well, I'll speak to you in a few months then. Bye.
Yeah.
Whereas if you lead with, hey there, it's been 6 weeks or 6 months since we last spoke, I'm assuming nothing's changed and you guys still thinking of moving but not quite ready yet. Don't know if I can help you try and find that dream house that might persuade you to get yours on the market, or something along those lines. Those kinds of ways of prospecting you can find can be really useful, I always
Right.
think.
Yeah.
So you build rapport so that they like you enough to listen. You establish your credibility by sharing some testimonials and some case studies. And then at the end, usually you try and create some urgency. You want them to do something as a result of your conversation. So as a client, typically what you want to do is offer somebody a test drive. And a test drive could be some free advice. It could be a shorter term contract. There's probably a variety of different things that you could do. You might go and take some sample pictures of their property and just show them what it might look like on the details and that kind of stuff. You might show them what virtual tours might look like in a couple of their rooms. I don't know if you guys do the virtual tours over there. So there's a few things that you can do that can win people over before they have to sign on the dotted line, just to sort of say, look, I'm here to help. Okay. My job is not to tell you what to do. It's just to help make it as smooth as possible. I'm going to try and get you as much money for your property so that you've got as much to spend. And I'll see if I can help you negotiate when we buy the one you're going to buy as well. And my job is to make this happen. And I don't know how it works over there, but over here, typically you only really get paid when the house is sold and it goes through.
Yeah, same.
Okay. So you're pretty reliant on being successful at your job if you want to get paid. And usually just regular contact is the thing that will make you stand out. That's the one thing I noticed when I was an estate agent was I had regular calls with the houses that weren't selling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't to ask them to reduce the price. It was just to tell them what was going on in the market, double check that they're not getting twitchy or that there's a greater sense of urgency from last time, that kind of stuff. You just try and keep them at bay, let them know you've not forgotten about them, let them know the proactive stuff that you're planning to do to try and drum up some more business and that kind of stuff. But yeah, like I say, it was one of the professions that I really loved, but quite often a lot of the agents would be hounding the customers, all the other agents, and sometimes you would get almost tarred with that brush of another agent chasing me. No, we've not made a decision yet. No, we're not viewing. And actually lead with some brilliant manners, and you'll find that normally that's enough to disarm people and make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. So we covered a massive amount of information. And if I try and summarize it, it's rule number one, just be a really nice person. Rule number two, don't try and sell anything in the first conversation. It's really just introduction and to feel. And then rule number three is stay in touch with them and keep on reminding them why you're there, and hopefully they will use your services. Is
absolutely. Yeah. And the relationships that you guys have, and this I think would be a really good test drive to help win customers over, is, you know, when the deal goes through and you've helped them move into their new property, depending on where they are, keep a bit of a map of where your really happy clients now live, because I imagine that some of them would be more than happy to talk to some of your potential clients about their experience of working with you.
Yeah.
And you may even find that some of them would jump on Zoom and stuff with potential clients, and it's a good way of convincing people. And not to correct you, you said about just being nice at the beginning. As well as being nice, just be polite.
Yeah.
But honestly, being polite is the best tool we have for salespeople, and it costs us nothing. But a lot of people are chasing a target, so sometimes they come across not in the best way.
Yeah, come across like salespeople.
Or
what people's presumption is, or assumption of what salespeople should look like. That's what they come across.
Absolutely. And it's horrible when you phone somebody and you know you've really caught them on a bad day, and you kind of get a bit of attitude or a mouthful of, and you're just like, man, you catch them on a different day, and this is why the permission to speak thing works so well.
Yeah.
And that's probably the main tip I'd give people is, if you do that, if somebody's having a bad day, they'll just say to you, yeah, you're right, now isn't a good time, call me tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that'll be the end of it. It'll be quick, short and sharp. It'll be over in a second. You can move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And then I suppose one final tip, and I know that I've kind of felt like I've sort of shared quite a lot in a short space of time, is that the other golden rule, I talked about getting permission to speak at the beginning of the call. As salespeople or account managers, or however you want to look at yourself, at the end of every call, you should be taking final responsibility for the next time you're going to speak to somebody.
Right.
Because that's the way you prevent what we call pipeline constipation. Those great conversations where people are really excited, then they want you to send them stuff or do loads of work, and then you do send them things, and then you follow them up, and they don't return your calls, and they don't respond to your emails, and they fall off the face of the earth for like 2 months, and you're like, what happened there? So always try and make a bit of a backstop when you're talking to people, even if it's actually, Anthony, we've decided, me and my wife, we're not going to retire quite yet. We've not decided. We might do it next year. I would say no worries at all. Well, look, I will touch base with you guys around Christmas just to wish you Merry Christmas. And obviously, if anything's changed by then, you can let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep touching base with you every 6 months. And when you decide you're ready for retirement, I'd love to help you.
Yeah.
And it goes back in my diary for 6 months' time. In fact, it goes in my diary for 3 months' time, because what I'd like to do after 3 months is send them a little message that says, hey there, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I know I'm not due to touch base with you until Christmas, but I just wanted to share what a lovely couple, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, has been recently, who have just retired, and we've just helped them with their move. Thought you'd be interested to hear what they have to say about us.
Yeah.
And I would subtly build on my credibility while they're waiting in my pipeline, so that when I follow them up at Christmas, or even next year when they eventually say, actually, we think we could be ready, I could say, fantastic. Well, I can't wait to come back out and meet you and your husband again. And can I check, do you remember that case study I sent you of Mr. and Mrs. Davis? They sent me a lovely thank you card the other day, because they've now been in their house for a whole year. Yeah. And you just kind of reinforce it and build good relationships, really, I suppose, is the way to do it.
Interesting.
So hopefully there's been some nuggets here for the guys in real estate, and those people who are a bit fearful of the phone. Fingers crossed that phone phobia is disappearing, and you'll be doing a few more follow-ups.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I certainly hope it will, because there's a lot of information and a lot of really, really good information. And then if people have some questions for you, if they want to ask for an advice or want to talk to you some more, how do they find you? How do they get in touch with you?
So if you Google the telephone assassin, you'll find me everywhere. So the telephoneassassin.co.uk or anthonysteers.co.uk will find me too. I'm obviously on LinkedIn, so I'd recommend people connect with me on there. If you do, and there's somebody who I'm connected with that you'd like me to introduce you to, let me know. I'll let you know if I know them well enough to use my name. But yeah, anybody who wants to reach out, my phone number is easy to find, but obviously I appreciate being here in the UK. You guys are 11 hours ahead of me. So if you do want to talk to me, if we can do it very early in the morning your time or very late in the evening, so that it's opposite ends of the day, I'd love to chat to people. And obviously, if I can be of any help, or if you get any questions come through you, more than happy to see if I can answer them or jump on another call.
Fabulous. Anthony, really appreciate it. And I know it's getting a little bit later in the day for you now, and you probably want to have dinner or get ready to end the day. So I appreciate your time, and I will definitely stay in touch with you. And if anything comes through me, I will forward it to you.
Awesome. Look, thank you very much for having me. Obviously, it's been lovely chatting. And as I mentioned to you, my plan is to get back out to New Zealand at some point. So fingers crossed, when we're all safe to travel and you guys are allowed to welcome us tourists back, I'll let you know when I'm in town, and we can have a beer and or a coffee and meet up.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you, Anthony.
See you later.
Bye.